Oh Christ, we're in for a ride on this one, aren't we? Have you ever found yourself in the face of overwhelming public opinion? Have you ever found yourself staring into that hypothetical mass of people all shouting and jeering at you and wondered why exactly it is that you're not coming around to their way of thinking? I've made it perfectly clear in the past that this is the way that I perceive Pokemon fans, although I will admit this is largely due to one particular Pokemon fan who's probably going to stab me if they ever watch this video, but frankly, if a bridge is mostly burned, throwing oil onto it seems the kindest thing to do, and that's where I stand now. Right, before you start sharpening your pitchforks, let me get a few things straight. Is Final Fantasy VII bad? No. Is it an unmissable experience? No. Is it worth playing at some point? Probably yes. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's crack on. FF7 was released in 1997 and was the first in the series to feature full 3D graphics except for the bits that didn't. This fact meant that Square needed to hire a frankly irresponsible number of artists and programmers, putting the game's budget at $46 million, which with current exchange rates is roughly enough to buy 152 million Freddos. FF7 focuses more on the gameplay side of things than it does on story, an unusual move from Square, which does start to show after a while, as the battles are fairly consistently interesting, whilst the storyline is about as consistent as the Ewell's legal defence. Not to say that it's bad, or symbolises everything wrong with racial prejudice, it just has a hard time focusing on one thing for long enough to make sense. For example, why does Yuffie live in a forest? Most people have a good reason for doing that. If my home had been turned into a tourist resort, I'd probably start a protest movement rather than becoming Tarzan of the Apes. As a general rule, however, the story remains relatively engaging, having given us some of the most iconic moments from the entire series, even if it does have a tendency for over-explaining obvious things, then scooting by other things with nary a backwards glance. What's saddening for me is that it took this to sell JRPGs to the West when the best instalment of the main series by a country mile had just been and gone. It set the precedent that all the Western audience was looking for was flashy lights, stupid minigames, and overblown cutscenes. Actually, mentioning minigames, I think this is the point where FF7 really loses me. I could have probably recommended it more if it didn't throw in sections where you had to race Chocobo, go snowboarding, perform CPR, control a submarine even more drunkenly than Indy in the Fate of Atlantis, ride a motorbike, and do squats, and this list isn't even exhaustive. I haven't even begun to mention the dating mechanics that run throughout the game, which I admit can be ignored with no real consequence, and the fucking cloud dress-up simulator. But the cardinal sin has already been passed by. Do you remember I mentioned Chocobo racing? Do you also remember how I mentioned that you only have to do it once and there's no downside to not playing it relentlessly? Do you also remember that I'm a filthy liar? Yes, as I'm sure you all know already, gaining access to the best material in the game demands no less, that you play the Chocobo racing game no fewer than about 25 fucking times, and I haven't got enough willpower in my entire body to put up with something as stupid and arduous as that. For God's sake, how does this sort of thing get a free ride? Whoever designed this system badly needs firing out of a cannon pointed at the sun.